How do you judge the GOAT? In a previous video, I came to the conclusion that Zhang Yining is the greatest women's table tennis player of all time. But ever since that video, the idea that maybe Angelica Rozeanu is the GOAT has been growing on me. The case for Zhang Yining is pretty simple. She's a double Grand Slam winner in an era when table tennis is pretty much globalised. The case for Angelica Rozeanu, though, stems from her life story and the adversity she faced and the fact she was still able to achieve so much. Zhang Yining was propelled to success by the resources, the training, the ambitions of the most populous nation on earth, a nation which puts table tennis front and centre in its national ambitions when it comes to sport. Angelica Rozeanu, on the other hand, had a nation state, a world war and the scourge of anti-Semitism stacked against her, and yet she was able to achieve so much in her table tennis career. Angelica Edelstein was born in 1921 to a well-to-do Jewish family in Bucharest, Romania. Now, the fact that she was Jewish is unimportant when it comes to her table tennis ability, but it was a fact that would heavily influence the course of her life. She picks up table tennis around the age of 9, encouraged and coached by her older brother, and she's pretty darn good right away. And by the time she's 15, she's Romanian national champion. In 1938, Angelica has her first international success. She wins the Hungarian Open, which, for those of you who know your table tennis history, you'll know that Hungary was one of the principal powers in the early decades of table tennis as an international sport. However, back home in Romania, anti-Semitism is growing and restrictions on Jewish life are ever increasing. Angelica had high hopes of travelling to that year's World Championships in London and doing quite well, but she's denied an exit visa by the Romanian authorities. She is able, though, to travel to the 1939 World Championships in Cairo, where she is disappointingly knocked out in the quarterfinals by the eventual winner. 1939, though, was of course the start of the Second World War, and Romania actually joins the Second World War on the side of Nazi Germany. Restrictions are ever increasing. Restrictions on ownership of property, restrictions on Jews holding certain positions. And for Angelica Edelstein, as she was at the time, a restriction on Jews entering all sporting facilities. For 4 years, Angelica Rozeanu would not even be able to enter a table tennis hall and pick up a bat. Perhaps, though, that was of little concern to most Jews. The Holocaust was in full swing in Romania, and around half of Romania's Jews would perish. Estimates range from around 250,000 to 360,000 Jews being killed. The Edelsteins are forced to sell their possessions and they go into hiding. Life in those war years would have been unimaginably tough. Fortunately, though, Angelica Edelstein survives the war, and shortly afterwards she gets married to Louis Rozeanu, becoming Mrs. Angelica Rozeanu. She also has a daughter. She becomes a mother. Table tennis, though, is calling, and she makes a return in 1948 to table tennis internationally at the Table Tennis World Championships, where she picks up a respectable bronze medal in the women's singles. Life in post-war Romania, though, was still very tough. It was now under a repressive communist dictatorship, and anti-Semitism had never really gone away. The Rozeanus make the decision to try and leave Romania. Unfortunately, they are arrested at the Hungarian border and returned back to Bucharest. Angelica Rozeanu, as a consequence, is denied a visa by the authorities to compete at the 1949 Table Tennis World Championships. Once again, another year missed in her prime years. 1950, though, the World Championships are being held in Budapest in Hungary, and she's allowed to compete. And it began what is possibly the hottest win streak in table tennis history. Angelica Rozeanu wins 6 consecutive women's singles world titles. Additionally, she picks up 3 mixed doubles gold medals, 5 women's team gold medals, and 3 women's double gold medals, all within the span of just 6 years. That's 17 World Championship gold medals in 6 years. So in 1956 she does eventually end her streak in the women's singles, but she's still a top prospect. Unfortunately, again, there's political interference in her career. The shenanigans continues in Romanian politics. She is lauded as a star back in Romania and used for propaganda purposes by the regime, sent on tours of the Soviet Union, for example, promoting table tennis, showered with gifts like a car, but they never really forgiven Rozeanu for attempting to escape back in 1948, and anti-Semitism was still lingering. In 1958, a Communist Party official who was an anti-Semite took over the Romanian Table Tennis Association and proceeded to purge the team of all the Jewish players, and Angelica Rozeanu was banned from playing any further international tournaments. Perhaps she was coming to the end of her career anyway, but again she was denied the opportunity to win further international medals. Perhaps a decade lost all across her career in her prime years. Angelica Rozeanu eventually does leave Romania, ends up in Israel. It's a whole story in itself, the way she leaves Romania, but we'll save that for another time. So, Angelica Rozeanu, the greatest of all time? Okay, so any claim that Angelica Rozeanu is the greatest women's player of all time is going to face some backlash, and some of those critiques are fair. One, of course, World Championships were held annually back then, so it was possible to win a lot more World Championship gold medals in a short period of time. Another critique would be to say that table tennis and women's sport in general was still in its infancy back then, and perhaps the opposition was not of the highest order. And I accept that. I think definitely throughout the 50s, 60s, 70s, with the rise of China and other East Asian nations, the quality of table tennis in women's sport and table tennis as a whole would have been higher, and the opposition faced by Zhang Yining or Deng Yaping would have been higher. But perhaps a more pertinent question might be to ask whether, given the same resources, the same environmental conditions, the same training, and the same opposition, whether Angelica Rozeanu or Deng Yaping or Zhang Yining, which one of them would have been more successful? And I think there is an argument to be made to say that Angelica Rozeanu would have been the most successful. That's not to diminish Zhang Yining's talent, for example. Clearly, even to get to the top of Chinese table tennis is a Darwinian effort of survival of the fittest. So clearly a very, very talented player. But Angelica Rozeanu lost the peak years of her athletic ability, almost a decade or so of table tennis, due to political reasons, anti-Semitism, war, having a baby, things like that. And the fact that she was still able to achieve so much as she did, is incredible. And it makes you wonder what she could have achieved given the full opportunities. Now, if you still think Zhang Yining or Deng Yaping is the greatest of all time, that's fair. And I wouldn't disagree with you. But I think there is a legitimate claim to say that Angelica Rozeanu is the greatest of all time. Well, perhaps. It's subjective. There's no objective answer. Yeah, I don't know. There we go. Anyway, I hope you found it interesting. Angelica Rozeanu, a legend.